It is Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements, and good New Year
Morning,
to you.
Good New Year.
Good New Year to you.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Medi New Year, as Eddie Murphy said in the classic Trading Places, which for some reason I use every year.
Well,
To much great reaction.
I'm sure.
Medi New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. No, it's a great movie.
It is. It's both a
not watched it for a
Christmas movie and a New Year's movie all in one.
Yeah,
Encompasses everything.
great comedy.
Yeah. So what's going on in the world?
Do we know?
Do we know what's happening?
Here it is.
What day is it?
Well, it is January 6th.
It is January 6th.
As we record this today. And
a solemn time
solemn time
in our nation's history.
Well,
which it was.
It
was a crazy day insane. A year ago.
It was insane. And I don't know that we're going to get a sense of all the truth behind January 6th. Trump and some of his loyalists are not cooperating with the select committee, which I don't know whether they're going to get to anything that we don't already know. I mean, maybe they will, but, Trump incited a bunch of people to march on the Capitol. Did he encourage them to break in and be violent? Yeah, I think that's a question. I mean, there's no question that he was bombastic in his rhetoric.
Sure.
And people interpret things however they want. Were there likely some interlopers that were kind of goosing it a little bit? Is it Dave Eppers, Bill Eppers? What's the name of the FBI informant that I don't remember?
Yeah.
But that's a legitimate question as to, was there these black ops guys that were egging it on, just as we know there have been federal agents that have egged on Antifa riots. So, the problem is that all of the stuff surrounding it only leads to more confusion and people trying to justify different things. The bottom line in my mind was this was completely inappropriate. If anyone believed that there was a legitimate way to overturn the election, then they had been lied to.
Absolutely.
Because there was no legitimate way.
No, absolutely.
And full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many things, I think, led up to that moment that were missteps or miscalculations by Donald Trump. And I kind of thought about this morning. I was watching a lot of the newscasts and watching all the events online, and I, for some reason, I went back to the summer of 2020 when we had BLM and Antifa riots ravaging this country, and people had different reactions to that. But the destruction of private property and the destruction of lives, personal lives, including some people viciously murdered, just increased the level of tension in our total society. And I don't believe Donald Trump or his administration gets enough blame. I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, but gets enough blame for prosecuting those riots. And I think that, along with not seeing the election shenanigans happening that summer with the changes in election law happening in different states and not legally pursuing some either changes or challenging those election changes from the campaign's standpoint.
Right.
Once an election is decided, it's hard to then challenge those laws. You can't really challenge those laws, which they tried to do after the election. And so there were so many missteps, I think, strategically. And I think if there had been a stronger response that summer in many ways, things might have been different. And then the miscalculations afterwards with Donald Trump doubling down on his claims that the election was stolen, and then by the way, in Georgia your vote doesn't count, so don't show up for the election, and then it turns the Georgia Senate vote the day before January 6th over to the Democrats.
Right.
So it's just this continued heightened, I think, just missteps, both in rhetoric and strategy, and then I think most glaringly, the throwing under the bus of, I think, 3 individuals who fell on their sword for him time and time again. One, of course, is Mike Pence,
Right.
who saved the republic that day and did his duty.
Amid chance of hang Mike Pence.
Yeah, amid chances of hang Mike Pence echoing through the
Not
Capitol.
by liberals.
No. I think Attorney General Barr, by him resigning at the end of December, was a clear middle finger to Donald Trump. Like, I'm not going to be part of this, this scheme. And then Mike Pompeo also fell on his sword several times. And the sad thing about it overall, I think, and I've said this before on the podcast, like, I am not a never Trumper. I'm not a forever Trumper. But I am a pro Pencer. I think Mike Pence has an extraordinary amount of integrity, and he showed that day. But what all this has done really is tarnish, in terms of policy, some of the good things that happened.
No question.
Through the very tumultuous 4 years. One being Israel and the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital. 2, the challenging of NATO and making sure NATO members pay their fair share into the alliance. One is the challenging of China. The other is the challenging of North Korea. Lastly, not even lastly, judges and the amount of conservative judges we were able to place on the federal courts. And the most important thing that we are debating about even this month with Build Back Broke is tax policy.
Right.
Which was monumental in terms of getting our economy moving. And those were good things. Those were things you and I supported. Yep. And yet they were completely tarnished by this lack
squandered, of... I mean, say whatever you want to, label it. But, I mean, it is remarkable to me that I think you're exactly right, that the time to litigate the election process was prior to the election.
It was that summer, for sure.
When we were in COVID and there were, lawsuits that said, oh, well, we should have mail-in balloting because of COVID. We should have, in states that had not done that historically.
Yeah.
There should have been more challenges, more discussion ahead of the election, because for one thing, that would have given people a little bit more of an insight as to, okay, so what are the things that are going on? Instead, people were like, oh my gosh, this election was just stolen. And because there was not any true knowledge about what the process was, the big lie was able to be perpetrated, seeped into, a lot of the Republican base. It's still there, which is, unbelievable to me.
But there's not that perspective of everything that led up to the inactions that led up to the election. Now you can't excuse away, Mark Zuckerberg spending $421 billion? Is it a B?
No, I think it's
$421 million to try to sway elections in different districts. You can't dismiss, big tech silencing and censoring different conservatives. I mean, those are all real things that continue to happen that are wrong.
I think there are a legitimate number of issues that, the Hunter Biden story, would that have changed the election? Maybe. I don't know.
I think it's a stretch. I think people who knew about Hunter Biden knew about Hunter Biden.
Yeah, but
they were concerned about it.
Here's the thing, though, that I always go back to, and that is Trump won a record number of votes for a Republican. Okay, Biden happened to get more. In Arizona, which was a pivotal state, Trump lost by what was it, 10,000, 11,000
Yeah,
votes?
it was minuscule.
In the typical elections, presidential elections, going back prior to 2016, going back to I think I went back to 1952. Was that right? 60, 54. No, 56. Yeah, 52. So I went back to 1952. In Arizona, there are typically a few thousand people, ranging from 5 to 12,000 people in Arizona, that in a presidential election year will cast a ballot and will leave the presidential line blank. I find that bizarre, but it's historically, it's been the case. Every 4 years, there are thousands of ballots that people cast that have no mark for president. In 2016, that number was not 10 or 15,000, it was 90,000. So that tells you that there were a bunch of people, probably mostly Republican leaning, that were like, no way I'm going to vote for Hillary, but there's no way I'm going to vote for Trump, so I'm just leaving it blank.
Yeah.
Now, my belief was that if Trump could get those people to come back, you know, judges, those policies, you know, those kinds of things, that would have an impact, and that's why I believed he was going to win Arizona, because I thought he could get those people back. Turns out he got some of them back.
Sure.
Because he did get more votes than before, but there were still 60,000 people in 2020 that did not vote for president.
That's amazing.
Which is incredible.
Yeah,
60,000.
That's amazing. And you have access to this data, and you look over it. You know, that's what you do, and that's an amazing statistic. I did not know that.
Well, and so when people say, "Oh, this election," no, Trump didn't win the election because he couldn't convince enough of the 90,000 who cast no vote for president in 2016 to come back, come home, and vote for him. And, you know, those are people who the character is an issue.
So what you're saying is, which is really an interesting take, is that it wasn't so much Biden won, it wasn't so much Trump won. It was that a number of people just did not cast a ballot for president.
Right. They could not.
They could not bring themselves to do
They
that.
were primarily right-leaning voters who would never vote for Hillary or never vote for Biden. But a bunch of them by 2020 just couldn't vote for Trump. And it, you know, whether it was his handling of COVID, whether it was just his general demeanor, which, you know, fact is, he's an asshole. And
can we say that on a podcast? I guess we can. Okay.
We tell the truth here.
His demeanor is less than exemplary for a sitting president. Yes, that's
for anybody.
For anybody, and that is correct.
For a human being. I don't know. It's so I, you know, yes, January 6th will go down in history as a dark moment.
And yet how we're addressing it, I think, is not helpful. So you
it's
have
totally partisan.
So you have all this partisan things happening on Capitol Hill today. You have a January 6th commission, which is completely partisan, made up of 2 Republicans who will not get reelected, and you know, violently anti-Trump, which is fine if there was a balance. And what they're trying to do is find some sort of orchestration from the White House, which led to the riots on the Hill. And they're not finding it. What they're finding is Trump sitting in his you know, in the Oval Office doing nothing. And they're saying, well, he should have done something. Well, yes, I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, we all agree on that.
Yeah, he should have done something.
Should have called off the dogs.
But you know, he should have done something months before that.
Right.
There's a lot of things he should have done that he did not do.
Well, and it's
and that's the point I'm making, is that
right.
The seeds of this began, you know, 6 months before.
Right.
It really did. And his failures mounted before the election even took place. And the ironic thing that we find ourselves in is that the majority of Democrats still believe that the 2016 election was stolen.
That's right.
And that the Russians helped Donald Trump. which has been completely debunked.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's the great untold story, right? Is you look at polling that's just come out recently.
Yeah.
More than 50% of Democrats believe that the election of 2016 was stolen from Hillary. More than 50% of Republicans believe that 2020 was stolen from Trump. And yet,
Yeah. So where do we go with that?
this is the great divide. So I think where we go is there has to be, I think that there will be a number of places. Arizona is going to be one of them that's going to have some voter integrity type initiatives. There'll be, and the Democrats are saying this is democracy at risk. But it is not a risk to democracy to say to someone, if you mail in a ballot, we're going to require you to put your driver's license number on it or the last 4 digits of your social along with your signature to confirm that it's you. Or when you go to the here in Arizona, when you go cast a vote in person, you are required to show an ID. So now there's an initiative out there that will say, we're going to require an ID component when it comes to mailing in a ballot.
Yeah.
Well, that's completely reasonable.
No.
Completely reasonable.
It is completely reasonable. And what's ironic about the January 6th situation is that, Chucky Schumer is trying to now push H.R. 1, which is the Corrupt Politicians Act, in the Senate over the next several weeks, blow up the filibuster so that to do away with voter ID laws,
Right.
federalize our elections, and take election integrity measures away from the states.
Yeah.
Which, it's questionable if that's even constitutional.
Well, it's not, but what they're hoping is that they can pass this, put it into law for the next election, so that it somehow maybe it'll protect their majorities, and then they can deal with it on the legal side in the aftermath.
Now, it looks like as of today that they're not going to have the votes to blow up the Senate, and it's so ironic after Manchin blew up, Build Back Broke, and Bernie Sanders and AOC and the rest of them are saying, how can one man stop legislation? Like, how can one man defy the will of the people and the will in the Senate? Well, that was the brilliance of the founders.
Yeah.
That actually one senator is just as powerful as the other 99, and they can blow everything up if they want.
Yeah. It is called the deliberative body for a reason. The founders knew that the House, which was election every 2 years, was going to be more susceptible to the push and
the
pull.
Whims of the people.
Yeah.
I think is what they called it.
And that
the passions, they would be more inflamed by their own passions,
right,
of the moment,
and that senators every 6 years would not be as susceptible to all that stuff that was going on, in the spin and whirl of the current debate, and so it is true that legislation goes to the Senate to die, which is what it should. It should.
That's what the founders.
That was the point.
That's what they wanted,
Yeah.
because those passions for something like an HR 1, or there's plenty of other examples as well, that are being led by purely political factions, slows down or dies altogether.
Let's fast forward to 2023. Okay, let's assume that the Republicans take the House, which is a pretty big assumption. Not a big. It's a pretty easy assumption.
It's
right?
not a bold assumption.
Not a bold
at all.
assumption.
We just had announced a couple days ago 25 Democrats are retiring.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 27. But 27.
I thought I heard 25.
So let's assume that the Republicans take the House, but let's also assume, which is a possible assumption, that it remains a 50-50 Senate. Okay? So but it's a 50-50 Senate, so the Democrats still have nominal control with the vice president casting the tie-breaking vote.
Sure.
Do we think that Chuck Schumer or Dick Durbin or any of those folks, the harder left of the Senate Democrats, would blow up the filibuster? with a Republican House?
No,
Hell no.
no. No, and these are individuals who have made very impassioned speeches on the Senate floor, decrying any changes to Senate rules with regard to the filibuster, as early as 2017.
Well, yeah.
So it's we've said it on this program before. It's theater. It's such theater because they know there's so many other backbenchers like our own Senator Mark Kelly.
Where is Mark Kelly?
Where is Mark Kelly? Does anybody know? Has anybody seen Mark Kelly? He's
Still
in space, floating away into the ether.
Out there.
Never land. But I mean, these folks who are hiding in their offices, not taking a firm position on Build Back Broke, not taking a firm position on the filibuster, letting Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema and others take all the slings and arrows. And yet we have all this theater going on, especially today with Chuck Schumer saying that the state of our democracy is in peril if we don't pass, the Corrupt Politicians Act, as it has been called by members on the conservative side.
And what's interesting is that it's now, with that becoming, with Build Back Broke being set aside because Manchin said he's not going to support it, and now the Senate Democrats putting freedom to vote and the remnants of H.R. 1. I think a lot of H.R. 1 is gone, but
the ID portion is still in there.
I mean,
they want to ban any type of ID laws.
Yeah.
But they want you to show your ID and your vaccination card when you go to a restaurant.
Yeah. The irony is
it's the hypocrisy. It drives you nuts.
Oh my gosh!
You need to show an ID in New York City. You were in New York City.
I was in New York City.
And your vaccination card.
ID with vaccination in order to
eat.
To do the most basic of all human things.
However,
food.
We will not allow anything like that to vote.
Yeah. Insane.
Never.
But as is reported, our own Senator Kyrsten Sinema has made it clear that she's not a fan of blowing up the filibuster, even for voting rights.
And that's what they were hoping for, is to do a carve out.
Yeah.
And I think it was Manchin who said the other day, the problem with the carve out is you get the whole turkey.
Whole turkey, right.
And you get the whole turkey, and that means there's so many unintended consequences, which we saw when Harry Reid, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. His legacy.
Changed the filibuster rules with regard to judges, and that got you a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court.
That's right.
It got you over 200 federal judgeships filled by conservatives. Thank you, Harry Reid.
Yeah, that is Harry Reid's legacy. I mean, he's turning in his grave realizing that.
Yeah,
but that's his legacy. So Sinema, rightfully says, look, guys, we blow this up, it's going to whip back on us the moment we lose power.
Well, but also, out of principle, I mean, and we touched on before in terms of what the founders intended with the Senate, it makes the Senate no different than the House. It makes the Senate just become an impassionate group of people who can do whatever they want based on whatever political leanings there are. Right now, the political waves within the Democratic Party are the Bernie Sanders AOC wing, and they're pushing for a lot of this, and that's where the passions are right now. And it takes somebody like a Joe Manchin, a Kyrsten Sinema, to say, a thwart. No.
Yeah. Well, it would be interesting if there was no AOC that was nipping at Schumer's heels as a possible Senate primary.
Do you think that's really what's happening? You think it's that? I mean, especially after she was seen down in Miami Beach with her Birkenstock wearing boyfriend sipping margaritas.
Well, I mean,
escaping the COVID nightmare.
Everybody deserves the ability to escape COVID. I mean, that's why we have states that allow people to be free, so that people in dictatorships can come and enjoy freedom.
Yeah, Governor DeSantis said, if I had a dollar for every congressman and governor who visited our state over the last 2 years to get away from the policies that they enacted in their own state, I'd be a rich man.
Yeah, he would. That's crazy.
But we digress.
Well, so watch what happens in the Senate. There will continue to be the.
This month is going to be an interesting month.
It will be an interesting month because there's going to be a lot of browbeating of Manchin and Sinema, but as pointed out in Town Hall today, which is something that you've been saying for months, it's not just Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. You've got other senators who are egging them on, saying, thank you, keep going, because we don't want to vote to blow up the filibuster either. I mean,
yeah,
I gotta believe Mark Kelly's one of them.
Well, Mark Kelly really hasn't taken what Mark Kelly does is he takes a position after everything has been done. And then he says, oh, I was for that from the beginning. That's sort of his tactic. And I've seen it on his Twitter feed and just some of the statements that he makes. Once there's enough of conventional wisdom going in a specific direction, he'll do something. But otherwise, he has no original thought. So you have a Mark Kelly, you have a Mark Warner, who's a very seasoned senator from Virginia. You have probably Tim Kaine from Virginia, probably both Virginia senators who don't want to do that.
Right.
I would bet when it comes to the filibuster, in terms of members of the Senate who've been there long enough, I bet there's a majority who don't want to do it because they've seen what happens.
So you think there are 26
Senate
Democrats? That's possible.
I mean, it's possible, and I just have this feeling that if you've been there long enough, and you've seen the ebbs and flows of the Senate, and also it is a place where there is comedy. There's friendships and deep-seated friendships across the aisle, and they get together, they talk, they discuss these things, and blowing up the Senate like that blows up that club.
Yeah,
it becomes a very, very different place, and I think to Kirsten's point, it becomes a very dark place where these passions are then realized, and then we become nothing but a 100-person House of Representatives.
Yeah, it does make the House or the Senate look more like the House, which is not what the intention of the founders was.
No.
It's not what we want as a country. There needs to be a break, as in
a stop
on
a stopgap
on the craziness. So let's let's watch what happens.
Yeah.
But we got to talk about COVID. We hit this a lot, but oh my gosh, there's just so
I just want it to go
much.
away.
Well, it's not going to go away, and that's the thing
know.
that people have to understand, that we're not going to eradicate it. I mean, maybe eventually, and maybe Omicron will help.
Omicron.
So we have been saying, we've said before, Omicron, all the wailing and gnashing of teeth, turns out definitely more transmissible, definitely less serious. There's some saying this could be the end. Finally, everyone's going to get it. I mean, it's remarkable to me how many people I know are now getting COVID
Sure.
that hadn't before. But it's just not that serious.
It's one thing that is bizarre is how many people who are vaxxed, triple vaxxed, quadruple vaxxed, whatever else, have not had COVID are still getting it. Very, light symptoms, what have you, but some are getting fairly sick. And it just brings back the entire, natural immunity debate.
Mm-hmm.
And is it real or is it Memorex? I mean, is your body, your T cells, your B cells, which are really what fights infection? Is that the driving force of our fight against COVID? And is it because now you're seeing everybody kind of change their tune about getting COVID. That maybe it's best if everybody got COVID,
Right.
and because this is such a lighter variant, and if you get COVID, we can get to herd immunity that much quicker. We had a little debate in our household over the holidays about natural immunity and and vaccines and different things, and vulnerabilities. And I'm still a firm believer that natural immunity is our best way out of this. And if you are vaccinated and get COVID, I mean, and it's slight and you plow right through it, more power to you. But it's still amazing to me that natural immunity is not being heralded and spoken about in the way that it probably should.
Well, and there's one reason for that, and there's no money in natural immunity. There's no money in natural immunity.
Well,
The drug companies can't make money.
but you have a Pfizer, you have a Merck pill now and a Pfizer pill that apparently the Biden administration is now embracing and saying,
Well,
we
yeah,
got to
but
get
again,
these that are treatments.
But if you say if you say there's natural immunity, there's no reason for the pill. There's no reason for the vaccine. I mean, I think the vaccine. This is one thing that I've been mystified as to why Trump didn't herald the vaccine.
Well, he seems to be
constantly. Well, it's a little late.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a remarkable scientific feat, no question. Now, do we know everything we should know about it? Absolutely not. Has it saved lives? Definitely. Has it cost lives? Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that you have, healthy young men, and by young I mean teenage, late teens, early 20s, taking a vaccine when they have no underlying issues. That's just a stupid risk because there's no risk from COVID.
Sure.
I mean, it's just essentially zero if you're healthy and not obese. And so we have all these, the thing that is a little bit maddening for me is that you have a vaccine that came fast, miraculous, great. They're immune, legally immune. The vaccine makers, the drug makers, have immunity from any legal recourse of the vaccine. And so there's no incentive for them to be, clear about what the risks are. I mean, you watch a drug commercial on TV, it's a 45-second commercial. 15 seconds is about the drug, and 30 seconds is about all the side effects that are possible. That they do because they don't want to be held liable.
Well, and that's because those drugs have gone through rigorous study over several years.
Yeah.
Before they're brought to the public.
I mean,
and those side effects are documented.
Right.
Amongst a broader scope of the populace.
But you don't have to do that for COVID vaccines because there's no legal risk.
Yeah.
Well, I think that raises a question, and it,
certainly
and
an ethical
question. The conspiracy of the public health advocacy arm, and there's public scientists, or there's the health scientist, and there's the public. I have concluded that Fauci is not a scientist; he's an advocate.
He's a politician.
Because
and when you've been there that long, you become a politician. And there's money in it for him.
Yeah, if you really follow science is messy. It changes all the time. There's no black and white. Everything is probability. And that just doesn't, that's not an easy thing for politicians to be able to message. I will highly recommend that people have any questions about. So there's obviously a lot of people that are. If you listen to Joe Rogan, he's had some people on that are really on what would be considered the fringe of anti-vaccine, or at least vaccine question, vaccine cautious. But there is a excellent podcast on Peter Attia's Drive podcast with a couple of doctors where they just are very straightforward about this is opinion, this is fact, this is what we think, this is what we know, and it is extremely illuminating, and very frustrating, because it is clear that the mishandling of this thing from the beginning is awful, and the thing that's crazy is that the Biden administration, in some ways, Biden won because of how badly Trump handled it. And maybe it's not how badly he messaged on it, right? Because a lot of stuff that Trump was saying that turns out to be true was used against him because he just didn't know how to say it in
Yeah.
a reasonable way. I mean, you don't drink bleach, but in fact, if you take chlorine and you do a nasal wash early on, anyway, the point is that the Biden administration has done just as much damage to the American people as what Trump did when he was president, whether it is in unnecessary deaths from COVID because of various policies and the lack of the universal effort to push back against any kind of treatments of COVID, or if it's the lockdowns and the mask mandates and the things that are creating a mental health crisis. All of these things.
Early on in the Biden administration, we passed this huge COVID relief bill, and part of what was in that bill was money for more testing, and yet we're hitting this Omicron variant, and there's not enough home testing kits available, and that was part of that plan, and it was never executed. You mentioned treatments, the Pfizer treatment, the Merck treatment; those have been ready for 6-8 months. And not enough effort has been getting those to the marketplace to where, I got COVID, and within 2 or 3 days, if I take this pill, by the way, I'm much better. But even alternative treatments like Z-Paks and other things that actually help you get through COVID.
I mean,
because it's an
ivermectin.
infection.
There's a bunch of different things that are helpful and shorten it and make it less severe. And had we put, had there been more direction and more research done quickly on this? I mean, thank goodness that doctors figured out fairly early.
Well, a lot of doctors have figured things out very, very early, but they've been silenced. They don't want to say. They don't want to say anything because they could get ostracized and they could lose their practice. And I know some of those doctors.
Yeah.
And so when you have COVID and you're diagnosed with COVID and you're feeling horribly, and if you call your doctor, and I won't even say who I called, and he says, can I call you in a Z-Pack? You're like, what? Yeah, Z-Pack. Are you taking your Mucinex? Yeah. Okay, I'll call you in that Z-Pack. And in 3 days, it's gone.
Yeah. Well, and what I was about to say was that thank goodness doctors early on figured out that the ventilators were actually more likely to kill you than save you.
Yeah.
And that just turning people over on their stomach. I mean, there was so much that we learned so quickly, and unfortunately people died as a result of, faulty reasoning early. But, we got some of that figured out. Well, why didn't we take the next step and say, okay, well, we know how to deal with trying to prevent them from dying in the hospital from ventilators or whatever. Let's try to prevent them from getting to the hospital. The moment the symptoms come on, let's get them on a regime.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's make sure that we have in the public domain all the different things you can do if you get COVID to get over it quickly,
and
which was known.
One way to get over it quickly is to be healthy, and so
and that discussion is only now happening in the public sphere about the vast majority of people who are adversely affected by COVID are, and you've made this point many, many, many times, is people who are overweight, have heart conditions, and these comorbidities that exacerbate any type of treatment.
Right.
And actually, and there's now new studies coming out about the people who get COVID again, and it is very rare, but it's the people who have these illnesses.
Yeah.
They're in their 70s and 80s. They have these comorbidities, and they're susceptible to getting it again.
Right.
More so than people who are younger. And,
definitely more so.
And healthy. And yet we have not had a comprehensive discussion in this country about health.
No.
And we had governors across the state, including our fair governor, shut down gyms. Now, which was crazy.
Yes. Now I'm watching
and get sued for shutting them
yeah,
down, by the way,
yeah.
too.
I'm watching Morning Show on Apple with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, and
I'm familiar with the show, but I've not watched
I'm at the point in the show where the COVID is just now kind of breaking through in the United States, and it's interesting because I forget I have forgotten a little bit about where we all were mentally when I mean it was kind of like confusion, fear. So, do I think that it was handled poorly from the beginning? Yes. Do I think that there was a lot of things that were done that didn't make sense in hindsight? Yes. But at the time, it was like, oh my gosh, we don't know. Let's wash our hands for 20 seconds. Let's sterilize everything. I mean, there's just a lot of things we didn't know at the time that we know now. And that's the thing that drives me the craziest is that the stuff that we know now, 2 years into this, and we're still doing stuff as if we're just learning about it.
Yeah, like in Chicago, the teachers union shutting down the schools.
Well,
and so finally you have a lead editorial in the New York Times questioning this idea that maybe COVID policy has been too skewed towards the comfort of adults rather than the mental, physical, emotional health of our children.
And I have given, not so much on the podcast, but I have been very critical of Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago.
Oh my!
I think she's had some real challenges, the crime rate, et cetera. But I mean, her taking a stand against the union, saying kids need to be in classrooms, period, is a breath of fresh air.
Well, I mean, this
coming
is actually
from a Democrat mayor.
But it's coming actually from the administration. You got to give them props finally for putting their foot down or saying what we've known for a long time is that, okay, enough. Kids need to be in school, period. They need face-to-face interaction. We have a mental health crisis going on with our kids. We have a suicide crisis going on with our kids. We have a drug overdose crisis going on with our kids, and that is due to our COVID policies. We need to stop this now and get kids back in school. And kudos, to our governor for standing up and saying, listen, if you have a school that's closed, by the way, you as a parent is going to get money so you can go
take them somewhere else.
Take them somewhere else. And what does the press do? They fault him for it.
Well, not only that,
E.J. Montini the other day had this horrible article about Doug Ducey and what he was doing against the children. And I was like, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah, Doug Ducey doesn't care about killing children.
Yeah.
All right.
It's unbelievable.
Give me a friggin' break. I mean,
he's the most irresponsible journalist we have in this state.
He's not a journalist.
Well, I mean, whatever
Don't
he
even
is.
give him that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry. You got me all riled up about him.
There's
some good people, and there's some good people over there. At
EJ,
the
you're welcome to come on. We promise to be nice. Just ask Lori Roberts. We were very nice with Lori.
We were nice to Lori Roberts. Who called you the Prince of Dark Money?
I think it was Dark Money Maestro.
Dark Money Maestro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
how's that going? Are you living up to your?
I think so.
Your moniker during. It's January.
It is January. It's It's an election year, so it's going to get interesting. There's no question about that.
No, but I just thought his opinion piece the other day was just so irresponsible. We need kids back in school, and we need to correct the wrongs of the policies that were made out of our own fears. And kids need to be in school.
Well,
they need that person-to-person interaction, and the teachers who are like in Chicago, the teachers unions who are balking against and shutting down the schools for the next 4 months. I mean, they should be ashamed.
Well, and it has the good thing that'll come out of this is it'll expose the teachers unions for what they are, and that is they don't give a shit about kids.
No, they never have.
They literally don't. This is all about power. We have video of their general counsel talking about it's not about kids, it's about power. I mean, in a conference that they did right before he retired a few years ago, Randy Weingartner, head of the whichever
American
one,
Federation of Teachers,
back last year saying we have to do everything possible to keep classrooms closed to protect the teachers, and then this year saying, "Oh, I never said that we should close school." It's like, come on. I mean. And it's because they're getting the backlash, and I suspect that membership in teachers unions are going to fall
Well, I mean, you can make
the
a
real teachers that care about kids, that are doing the job because that's what their passion is in life, is to educate children, recognize this is crazy.
well, you can make a concerted argument that that's why Glenn Youngkin is the
No question.
governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
No question. People like to say it's CRT. And no, this is about parents wanting their kids to be in classrooms, learning, and the pushback of teachers unions saying, "Oh, well, no." I mean, it just I don't understand it. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, we've gone from 15 days to slow the spread to 2 years to really screw up our country.
Yeah. Let's flatten the curve.
Let's flatten the curve.
I guess the teachers union, that meant just let's flatten our education curve.
Well,
right
I mean,
down
and
to
you
zero.
saw that early on, and they looked at it as an opportunity and never let a crisis go to waste, right? They looked at an opportunity to consolidate power and to exert their curriculum, like CRT and other things, online. And that's why you're seeing the backlash that you are, because all of a sudden parents are at home and they're watching what their kids are learning online or looking at it and saying, wait a second, this isn't right.
Yeah.
This isn't, you shouldn't be learning this. And what's going on? And now they're questioning, which is good.
Yeah. No, I mean, there will be silver linings come out of this issue, but there's a lot of chickens yet to come home to roost as a result of the policies that we put in place in some places. You know, these school closures, the masks, these are things that are going to affect kids, a whole generation of kids. We have no idea what the true ramifications are yet, but it's not going to be pretty.
No, I mean, you have some of the latest estimates. I mean, kids are 2-3 years behind reading, math. They're coming back into school really struggling and socially at a disadvantage.
Well, and there's a study out that shows that kids born during the pandemic, are already behind in their language development because of the masks.
Yeah.
And that's something that Alyssa and I have worried about with Reagan, who's almost 3, and Vincent, who is coming up on 8 months. I mean, we try to be in places as much as possible where masks are not required so that they get the full experience of their development, right? I mean,
well, and the sad thing now, I mean, now they're saying because of Omicron, cloth masks, they might not be as protective as we thought. No, they don't protect at all.
No masks other than an N95.
And you're not going to make everybody wear an N95 mask, which is it's beyond a surgical mask.
Yeah.
And
it's literally, it's called a respirator.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you put it on and wear it right, it's hard to breathe.
You can't breathe very well. And that's not nothing we want for our kids either.
Well,
what haven't we covered?
I don't know. I think we've covered enough. So fed up. So fed up with this COVID stuff.
It's crazy, but hopefully, and you don't, hope is not a business strategy. It's not a personal strategy, but with the advent of Omicron, natural immunity, herd immunity will be with us quicker.
Yeah, I mean, those that are healthy should get it, have the natural immunity that comes from it, because they show that there is cross immunity. If you get Delta, you're immune to Omicron. If you got Omicron, you're immune to Delta. Whatever. So, yeah.
So we had Alpha. We had the granddaddy, which is basically what it is now.
Yeah, I did.
So hopefully those T cells and B cells keep cranking.
Yeah,
and they keep cranking because we take our health very seriously too.
And that's the thing that I hope we get out coming out of this is people have a resurgence of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, that would be a good thing.
We need to cut obesity rates in this country significantly.
Well, you couldn't ask for a more destructive virus to attack one of the greatest weaknesses in our country, and that's our health.
Right.
Over 600,000 people die of heart disease every year. that's before COVID.
Right.
And now you plop COVID on top of that as an infecting agent, and they're saying, 800,000 people in 2021 died of COVID. Well,
I think it's
a
800,000 total.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a
Between
misleading.
2021.
That's a misleading number because you've got heart disease, you've got all these other
And it's
other factors
because
into that number.
It doesn't distinguish with COVID or from COVID.
Yes, it doesn't.
I'm guessing that if it's ever done, and I highly doubt it ever will be. but I hope
Dr.
it does.
Faustus is now trying to distinguish that within the children who are coming to the hospital either with COVID or because of COVID.
Yeah. Anyway, I would
That's another
guess that-
podcast.
yeah, the death rate from COVID is probably.
It's less than 10% is what they.
You think it's 10%?
Well,
I was
mean,
gonna say 25
of that
but-
number
Of the 800,000?
yeah, is what the number was for
Even
some
if it
time.
was 50%, I mean, that makes it a totally different ballgame in how because it's less than what you're talking about,
Yeah.
heart disease and et cetera. It still
Tho-
is.
the-
but
and those issues, the heart disease, smoking, diabetes, all those, they're not going away anytime soon.
Right.
Those numbers have stayed, sadly, pretty consistent. Pre-COVID.
there's no vaccine to eradicate that.
No.
So it's just people need to use common sense and live healthy.
The biggest vaccine is your own focus and understanding of your health, and to get out and and get yourself healthy.
Yep.
You know,
All right. So the message is be healthy.
be healthy, and just remember that this is a podcast founded on the values of faith, freedom, and free enterprise, which founded this great country.
That's right.
So thank you for listening. If
Take
you're
care,
out there,
everybody.
stay healthy. God bless.
See ya.